Okay, what are we talking about today?
We have an entrepreneur in the house today,
A food entrepreneur?
a food entrepreneur, and we're going to be talking about 8 catering. Do you ever wonder where your food comes from? That's what got us started on this adventure.
In each episode, we ask experts to weigh in on the food topics that matter to you, from growers to producers to chefs.
And I challenge John, Darren, and you to learn more about your food and the stories behind it. From our hub on Vancouver Island in the beautiful Comox Valley, join us as we explore our edible valley.
And a very good day to you. This is the Edible Valley podcast. My name is William. I'm the producer.
And I am Chef Jonathan Fraser, and today we have a special guest today.
I'm Darren Howlett, guest.
Guest.
Guest!
Hey.
Oh, a new one every single time.
Yeah,
Darren, it's great to have you here.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the long trip.
Yeah, thanks. I sort of proposed doing this episode because we've done this now 8 years, 7 years, 8 years. I was like, maybe it's time to actually talk about one of the things I do outside of this.
Well, we've
Podcast
we've
atmosphere.
talked about it.
Yeah.
But we've never actually devoted
into
a
it.
whole episode about it.
Right.
And why not,
Yeah.
selfish self-promotion, right?
So Darren is a fellow co-host. If you are listening for the first time, welcome.
Hi.
But today we thought we'd actually gain some information from within the ranks.
Yeah. So, John's right. We have talked about it or alluded to it in the past where I have a small catering business. And I say small because I would like to keep it small. I don't want it to grow too big. I like it. It's manageable. And I really find a lot of satisfaction in it. But yeah, it's sort of going through a growing phase that I didn't see.
Well, you're set to one demographic for your
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
you're catering towards
Kids. I've always been. Sorry, I'm going to remove my sweater here.
Oh, excuse me. What you?
Um,
Sorry. Let's start from the top because I'm actually already really interested.
Sure.
I've known you for a long time, and
Yeah.
I know precious little about this business.
Yeah.
So, let's start with the name 8 Catering. It's
Yeah.
kind of a cool name. How do you get there?
Okay, so you guys used to make fun of me that every time I would open my mouth, I was talking about the bar I used to own. That used to be called 7. And so when I did this catering business, which was actually almost the business I did right after the bar, I called it 8. But I mean, it's spelt 8 as in the past tense of eating, ATE.
Oh, as if I love that.
it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's ATE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8
But
catering.
then what's your next business?
I've already just applied for something that starts with 9. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, for the next one. But as far as how this got going, well, like I said, after the bar, I wanted to get back into food because that was sort of my roots. And you'll remember I had a food truck and I did sushi at all the festivals. And at the time I was...
That was called 6. No.
No, it was Kamabento. But I used to date somebody who had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit as well. And she suggested, because I was sitting there doing all these festivals during the summer, and then in the off season, it just sat there. And I was like, oh, I wish I could do something or find another way to use this resource and equipment that I have throughout the year. And then she said, "Yeah, you just have to find something that doesn't operate in the summers. It would give you your summers free." And then
seasonality.
And then that was just like, oh, what if you did something that worked with the schools, the school system, the local schools? Yeah. So I put together a menu and gave it a go, and it's been 9 years, and it's been relatively mobile. It hasn't really had firm footing. It's sort of bounces around to whatever available kitchen there is. But yeah, so this year the big move is towards, this year the big move is towards doing something, finally having a stable, permanent kitchen of my own. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
All right.
well, how does this, what needs does this catering fulfill for you
For me,
and for the community?
yeah, for the community. What?
That was my question. You absolute bastard. I've got one question written down. You.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, so
Well, you're pointing at me. I'm like, I want to take that question.
the one thing I don't know how in depth to go. I was brought up in a house where food was super important, nutrition was super important, health was super important. We had very little of anything else, but we always had good food. And I guess I just came up with that philosophy. I saw that my kids were going to school and what was being offered in their hot lunch program, and I was frankly quite appalled.
Right.
I was like, I'm not paying for my kids to eat this. Forget it.
So what are we talking about?
What do you mean? I'm not going to name names of
The food, so.
Yeah.
Turkey
like-
Twizzlers.
Pizzas and
Sure.
French fries and
Yeah,
burgers
exactly.
and-
Stuff like that where I wasn't really happy, and I knew that stuff was being made in, mass produced without a lot of nutritional value. And so I was like, I can do better than this, and right off the bat, I was doing better than that. And that's now where I've sort of rest my everything on that, is that this is far better. It's locally sourced wherever possible. It's going to be far better than anything you're going to get from any of the big chains, and at a comparable price. So,
Wow.
yeah. And so this year I went even one step further, and actually I ran into somebody at one of the schools yesterday that I knew, and she asked, okay, so like what makes this unique or different or what have you? And I said, well, for one, on the website, I've listed every single ingredient I use, and I won't use anything that the kids can't pronounce or identify. So that I thought that I can go that one step further this year, where I can reevaluate my menu so that they understand so everybody plainly understands what's going in. There's no preservatives and what have you. But yeah.
So it's kind of still changing. You still kind of looking
I refine it a little bit every year. I look at what works and what doesn't work. I take feedback from the previous year and apply it to what's going forward.
Okay, so I'm curious how you made it comparable on price, because obviously the districts would have gone with previous suppliers,
Right.
probably due to price. That's often the case. How did you manage to do that?
I just accepted the fact I wasn't going to make the same price point that you would make in a restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had very little overhead. I don't have a lot of staff. So I'm able to trade off making less of a profit for that. I just do more of the work myself.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think actually that's a really good general marketing business thing, where you can just say, we just make less profits. It's as simple as that. We don't have BMWs. We have Nissans.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's great, and it's honest, and you know straight away.
Yeah.
Where there's no secret cut in quality or the suppliers, and no one along the process is being mistreated. It's just you're making less money.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my thing on that, when I think I actually disclosed to a few of these organizers, because they had the same question: how are you charging this? And I just look at it as it's easy to make pennies per portion when I'm doing 200 portions. It makes it worthwhile, right? If it was only 20 or 30, yeah, it wouldn't be worthwhile.
It'd be more of a charity, at
Right?
that level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I'm not even opposed to. I mean, I've come to really see how helpful this is to kids, and I get feedback from some of these organizers and parents saying that just that it's beneficial and helpful, and so that makes me feel charitable. And sometimes there are certain scenarios where some of the schools, they have kids of lesser means, and I just tell them, just tell me how many extra portions you want, because I don't like the thought of kids going hungry. And if I'm delivering food, why not deliver a couple extra portions? So that those kids get fed too.
So what I would say is, as a result of the kids eating better foods, what are the actual benefits that are coming out of this? Like, if you were to go to the core thing that really makes this better than mass-produced cheap as chips, what would that be?
Well, I'm not part of the school board or programs in that regard. I'm not really disclosed any actual stats or details, but just based on feedback from various organizers that I work with. When I talk about organizers, I'm talking about the people that organize the food programs in each individual school. They've said that it's helpful. It's beneficial. They're, the kids have more energy, more attentive,
Right.
by having healthier food.
So they're learning
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Better home lives.
Yeah. And I will say, I know that we haven't really gone into that, but I have had a couple of friends ask if I would do catering or small events, small parties, what have you. And I've generally declined because at this point I've put so much effort and energy into developing a kid-friendly menu that I'm sometimes a little bit disassociated from a more adult palate. So now, like, I always think in terms of, oh, that's going to appeal to a kid. Oh, that's going to appeal to a kid, or that, and yeah. So I've sort of just leaned into it this year, and instead of being apologetic for the fact that I'm not there for everybody, that it's pretty much kid specific.
Right. Well, as going with that, let's talk a little bit about what kids want to eat and what are your most popular dishes. And like we even talk about what you offer the kids, like some of the, I know I've made chicken Caesar wraps with you before over the years.
There's been times when I'm like, oh my God, I got to do 250 of these in the next hour. John, can you come help me? And so I've found one of the biggest surprise ones for me was, I'll step back even further. So it all started with sushi because I used to have a sushi truck.
Right.
And so at first I was offering just sushi. And it was really funny because this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And the divide was absolutely visible. Every kid from grade 4 up wasn't ordering it. And every kid from grade 3 down was. And something somewhere happened. Yeah, something somewhere happened where that just became a thing that at a certain year or a certain
younger,
age.
yes, older, no.
Yeah,
And then that grew
the
other way around.
It grew. So as those kids kept going through the years, I kept getting more and more orders because those grade 3s were now grade 4s. So on and so on.
I want to say that was the exact same thing with the salad bar.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering about the salad bar program that's in the I was working with the Hugh Band Elementary. We did a podcast on it. I forget what episode it was. So just a little side note for you. If you're interested about the Hugh Band Elementary School's salad bar, check out episode 145 of the Edible Valley podcast, where we talk to Shannon Simpson and Caroline Fisher. How do you get kids to eat their vegetables? But that one was really, it was interesting that, it was the young kids coming in and the younger parents were all over us and got the kids really involved in it. But the older kids not even interested in it. They were stuck in their, these are the foods I want, and weren't interested to get into it. And it was funny how, so the numbers, like when I started, we had 40 kids a week, every 2 weeks or a week for salad bar. But after when I came, like 5 years, 6 years later, the entire school was
on
eating,
board.
and it was like 250 kids.
And that's how it's been for me too. So I started adding menu items after, when I was like, oh, sushi's only going to get me so far, and I can do. That's when I started looking at the other menus that were around, and like, I can do better than that. I can do better than that. And and so one of the ones that really surprised me, that is one of my biggest sellers, is burritos, beef burritos. To me, like, I don't know why I'm surprised it's a big seller, but it is. Like, I sell more beef burritos than any other item for sure. But I sort of, to test the waters, I base it off my kids' palates, but I know that my kids had a different palate than most kids out there, and went with some time-honored restaurant menus where I'm like, well, as long as it has tomato sauce or cheese, there's an element there that kids are going to like.
Right.
And and so that's where I got started on my menu, and then moved quickly away from there because just even my son like doesn't like cheese and doesn't like tomato sauce. So I'm like, well, there's got to be a lot of other kids out there like him. But over the years, I would say my biggest sellers are the chicken Caesar salad wraps, the beef burritos, chicken Alfredo, and penne bolognese. Those are the biggest ones.
And what are the flops?
There's been some flops. Yeah, absolutely.
What do kids say? No.
Last year I did a chicken broccoli curry dish on rice, which came out of requests. And even though I was able to deliver it, I thought a really good product. I thought I had it myself and I quite enjoyed it. The kids just didn't respond to it. That's last year. There's always, almost every year, there's almost always one flop, but that's part of constantly adding to your menu, right? And trying new things.
Yeah, you have to. You fail forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the other ones that didn't do well, which I was surprised, I offered shepherd's pie, and that was only 1 year because it just didn't fly. It just didn't take off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
In terms of a burrito, I am not exposed to kind of Mexican food as much. By where I'm from, it's much more Indian food,
right?
Where Mexican food is more popular in North America. I look at a burrito as a fairly unhealthy item, but I'm assuming you've done something there to make it.
Yeah, I mean,
not an unhealthy
it's
item.
super straightforward. I make my own spice blends, and then it's ground beef, corn, a bit of rice, cheese. That's it.
Right, so it's just simple.
Yeah, it's simple,
foods.
but it's all real food. You know,
Great.
like I'm not using any.
And you do a little salsa. And
sour
cream.
A little salsa and sour cream with it, and
So I really like what you're doing. I think it's got some real benefits to kids and to the next generation, and to getting those good habits in, which certain fast food chains have also discovered for many years and are doing it for the opposite reasons. But I know John has some more food-based questions. So I might suggest that maybe you want to ask a few food-based questions, and I could then go into the more businessy questions. Or I could do it the other way around. It's just I do have... But I don't want to take us off the food course too much.
Sure. Well, now I'm on the spot about what do we want to talk about food, because there's so many interesting things. I'm just saying, with you doing the food, and what has been some of the challenges of trying to get the food delivered?
Yeah, holy.
Because that's a huge aspect of it, like keeping everything fresh and warm and clean. And
that's the other thing too, is that because I haven't had any permanent location, and I don't mean that I'm like from day to day moving from kitchen to kitchen. It just means that I'll do a block here and a couple months there, just based on what's available for rental kitchens. And that in itself can be challenging because each one has its own limitations and what have you. But in the past, I used to do big coolers, but that meant that I had to have a certain type of vehicle, and then the coolers weren't coming back to me in good condition. And it started to become just as much to maintain and retrieve the coolers as what have you. And then I tried, I don't even know what you'd call them, the big totes, big sort of plastic totes. I found that they could hold a bit of the heat, but that's been the issue, is trying to make sure everything arrives warm.
Right.
And God, it's been an issue. It probably plagued me for about 3 years before I could finally find. And then now, just this last year, I've decided to try some of those. They're everywhere right now. Those I don't even know what they're called, but every grocery store sells their own branded ones. They're just the bags.
The thermal bags.
Yeah, and so I bought tons of those, and instead enough so that I didn't have to go back to any one school and pick up those bags. I could just wait until their next delivery, and that solved everything. Everything's showing up super hot, because everything's within 15 minutes.
Was there ever a time when you just thought, this isn't possible, I can't do it?
Yeah, many times.
And then you just kept on...
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is this has always been, as soon as I sold the food truck, this became a secondary business to me. This wasn't my primary source of income. This wasn't my primary anything, but I kept doing it. Actually, because one of the organizers, when I told her I was going to stop, this was probably about the third or fourth year, I was like, I think I'm kind of done with this. I've got a night job. I've got a toy company. I had a lot of things going on, and she was like, no, and literally the look in her eyes, and she was like, no, I need you to keep doing this. I thought, okay, well, I'll keep doing it, but just for her, I can work it into my next year's schedule. And then of course she talks to other people in her profession, and of course when that next year came, 3 or 4 of them wanted me to keep going, and I was like, it stopped becoming about the money. And I'm not saying that I'm not money motivated, but it stopped becoming about the money. And I was like, oh, I'm actually helping these people. Yeah. And I'm helping the kids.
Yeah.
And there's a certain feeling of pride and accomplishment there, as well as,
that must have been a real moment for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's when I was like, okay, I'll find a way to keep this going. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've changed how you've done things too, because I remember and this was going back to Prontissima, we brought in the catering company into Prontissima.
Right, yeah, we were almost sort of folding it into it.
Yeah, as in something you were bringing to the business, as in a little bit of extra revenue for the business, which was great, good. But it became one of those things that we had, how many schools? 12 schools.
Yeah.
And we were delivering small box groups to each of them, but they were always different.
Yeah.
And so we'd get really confusing sometimes. So we'd be doing these. You used to do the box lunches that were
I did these little box lunches, and they'd have a variety of fruits and veggies, and then
cheese and crackers. And then I remember doing like 150 of those, and then doing 200 pastas.
And the problem there too was that because everybody was unfamiliar, everybody being our staff of our business at the time was sort of unfamiliar. We ended up overstaffing, but then that didn't make them any more comfortable with what we were doing. So it was a whole bunch of people not knowing what to do and tripping over each other trying to put this together. Whereas if it had just been me, I'd been able to just bang, bang, bang through it. Right. So in the it didn't work that way. It didn't scale at that time. What I was doing couldn't be made bigger because all it did was cause more problems.
Yeah, but you've also gone to a thing where you're only offering one dish at a time instead of like 30 different items at once, which was one thing we fell into. As you said, here's this menu.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't want to name the school, but they misunderstood what I said, and they thought that the 15 items that I was offering meant like they could order a la carte. So they're like, oh, we'll take 6 of those for these, whatever. I'm like, I'm not a restaurant. Like, for me to prepare all that, it's going to take 3 days, but yeah.
Okay, so if you had to explain to an alien in barely any words, just imagine you got $100 million. Okay, and for each word you lose $1 million, but you have to get an explanation of the following question: what is the key to supplying food to kids successfully?
Yeah. There's a balance between what
we're counting
between what appeals to kids, but also appeals to mothers and parents. I shouldn't just say mothers. And if you can find that balance and still make it affordable, then you're good. Yeah, it's
really important. Now, not to go too much off topic, but my first job after graduating was in market research, and there would be it was called TNS World Panel, and they had about 100,000 people being surveyed, and they got paid to be surveyed, and it was just there are an army of people out there in this world who fill out surveys about what they eat, and I sold the data about the circumstances which people chose to consume certain products.
Oh yeah.
And there were so many people, I could contact big food companies and I could say, I know that you are hitting a market that you don't know you're hitting. Oh, yeah. I know what your customers are doing with your product, and that's an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's a brand here, but there's a brand in the UK called Ski Yogurts, and their whole thing is like people skiing in the Swiss Alps, sort of super sexy, super fit and healthy, but tasty. And so they just assumed their customers were women. And so all their flavors were made around women, and the flavors were designed to appeal to women. But then when you looked at the data I sold, actually more than 50% of people consuming the products were men, which just they were like, what? Yeah. And actually, as you referred to just now, it was basically women who at the time, and maybe still do, generally did the household shop and wanted their husbands to have something to take to work that was healthy. They didn't want to just give them a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
So what Ski Yoga did was start having that balance between the two and developing flavors which appealed to the men but wasn't alienating the women from buying it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. There were times when I was definitely making items that were appealing to the kids, and kids would love to eat.
Yeah.
And I wasn't selling any because the parents wouldn't order it. And then on the flip side, same things. I did things that's super appealing to the parents, but their kids wouldn't eat it.
Nice.
So then I was like, okay, well, I got to find a balance here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be something that sounds great to a kid or looks great to a kid, but then the parent knows,
Because the customer is not the consumer.
Right, exactly.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I want to just quickly ask, I know we've pretty much come to the end of our time today, but is this scalable?
This is, yeah. It wasn't before. But again, like I said, now that I'm in my 9th year, I've paid closer attention to how to make it scalable and make sure that I'm not, shooting my own foot as I move forward. So yeah, it definitely is.
Okay. Yeah. So watch out for him. 8 catering.
8 catering. And now, so people who are interested, you really only deal with PACs, right? Is that how? Okay. So if you're wondering what PAC stands for and you haven't been around schools very much, PAC stands for Parent Advisory Committee. And they're basically parents and educators, administrators who are basically working together to make things better for the kids in the school through fundraising, planning events, getting extra activities for them, and just making it all around better for the kids.
Yeah.
You get your orders from those?
So there was a bit of a spin-off a couple of years ago. One of the mums that was on one of the PACs, she approached me and said, hey, can you do, there's a dance school, and this dance school has kids there through the dinner hour, and lots of kids there through the dinner hour. So I started delivering dinner to those kids. I think there was about 20 of them, 3 nights a week. And then there was a couple of sports meets, a track and field, whatever. And they just said, hey, can you bring, can you bring some sandwiches? Like not your hot lunches, but like whatever. And so then I started doing some sports meets. But yeah, I think that I sort of had to define what I was. And I pretty much became comfortable with the idea that my wheelhouse for this business is kids' food. So long as, if it's a kid-based event, kid, group, kid, whatever, I've got food that's going to appeal to that palate. The portions are designed for that, that age group. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's what it is.
I actually have more questions really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, could you take this in another area, like kids' parties?
Yeah.
And you'd see maybe the health thing taking more of a backseat, but it still needs to be not full of numbers. I mean, my brain is just going with so many ways to take this.
I honestly think that for me to get the satisfaction that I get out of it, which means, sometimes that's in lieu of dollars, for me to stick with it as I have to get that satisfaction, and that satisfaction comes from feeding kids good, healthy food. Yeah. And that's at the end of the day, that's like, I'm okay with whatever work I did, knowing that I was feeding healthy food to kids. And so I can't see that changing, or else I wouldn't want to be part of it anymore.
Yeah. So you stick it.
That's where that sticks.
That's probably why you're going to be successful.
Oh, well, thanks.
No worries.
So I guess now we go on to, how do people get in contact with you? Yeah. And I guess basically we want to talk about website, but I mean, most people are going to see you at the school, on the school websites and stuff like that, where
it's funny. So that's the thing, is that the last few years I've buried my contact info, which is funny because on our podcast here, we generally try to get people to promote themselves, and I've done everything I can to hide myself because I have another business and another job. I didn't want extra contracts. I didn't want extra business. I wanted minimal. And it was just this year when talking to somebody that's in business, and they said, wait, what? You purposely turn down business every year? I'm like, yeah, I try really hard to keep myself small. They're like, what would happen if you went the other way and tried to grow? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Let's see. So, so I finally have a website. And which I didn't have before, which is just 8cateringco.com. And
nice.
Yeah. And out there you can find not just everything that I'm offering this year, but I've actually got not the recipes, because obviously, not the recipes, but every ingredient that's in everything, so that you can be sure. And that's also in terms of allergens, things are easily identifiable there. So
contact details. 8 Catering Co.
Yeah,
8cateringco.ca.com. Oh, you got the big one.
Yeah, the big guns.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to say you've been a great guest, Darren.
Why, thank you.
We're hoping to maybe have you back someday.
Yeah. He's been well behaved.
Well behaved.
I'll take him.
Thank you for letting us use your house. No.
Yeah. Well, thanks for indulging me in doing an episode of self-promotion.
Awesome. Happy to. I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
So even if we do say ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Good pat on the back there.
Yeah. Well done, guys.
Well done. Good job.
Great podcast.
And I know we've got a bunch of other podcasts coming up too. So
yeah,
I know Will's been talking to some people. I've still got Jerry in the back of my pocket that we're just trying to find some time.
Farms,
I really want to talk about organic growing. There's lots of, and we got a couple chefs and some other entrepreneurs out there that we're going to be talking to over the next few months here. So I'm super excited about where we're going with the Edible Valley. So.
Yeah, it's the 9th of September today. It's creeping up on autumn, and we're going to look at getting some preserves people in.
Oh yeah,
this is the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so cheers. This has been the Edible Valley podcast episode. Is it 195?
194.
Oh, it's always 190.
You're always.
Are you sure? It's literally never goes up. All right, we'll talk about that later. My name's William. I'm the producer.
I'm Chef Jonathan Fraser.
And our wonderful guest.
I'm Darren Howlett. I guess.
Cheers.
And that wraps up another episode of the Edible Valley podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks goes to the local businesses that help support our podcast. They make it possible for us to showcase your local food community. We'd love you to follow us on your preferred social media at Edible Valley, where you can check out our blog, find recipes and tips, behind the scenes, and of course keep a lookout for where we are going to turn up next in your Edible Valley.
0-0. That went out.
It's on video. And this has been an Edible Valley production.
Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. Okay. Ready again?